Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to 2-Minute Talk Tips. This week's 2-minute tip: practice your presentation without slides. In the middle of a presentation one time a few years back, that dreaded blue screen of death popped up. My old computer had crashed hard. It was going through a complete shutdown, and right in the middle of my presentation. Of course, this was back in the day when it would take a good 5 minutes to reboot. And in the middle of a 20-minute presentation, that wasn't really an option. I couldn't ask the audience to just wait 5 minutes, and I couldn't keep them longer than had been allocated. And I also couldn't just skip 25% of my presentation and still get as much value out of the session as I needed to. My only choices were to either quit altogether or to continue without slides. Now, I got lucky. I had actually been conducting that particular presentation for a couple of months at that point, and I knew the slides really well. I could continue on without them. The fact is, stuff happens. Machines crash. Projector bulbs blow. People knock gear off of tables. And sometimes you're going to have to present without your slides. And it's important to be prepared. When you practice and rehearse, try a few run-throughs without those slides. If your slides are there to support you, can you get value out of your session if you don't have them? If not, figure out a way to get through the material without them. Even if you don't have your whole outline in your head all the time, try to memorize how you get from one topic to the next in case something does go wrong. Now, the other benefit to practicing without your slides is that even when you do present with them, you will know the material better, and your audience will see you as better prepared. You'll be less likely to look at the screen during your session, and you'll focus more on the audience, and those are all good things. So practice without your slides today. And that's this week's 2-minute tip. Stick around after the break for an extended discussion about working through writer's block. Thanks for listening. It's early in May in 2017 as I record this episode, and professor, philosopher, and writer Robert Pirsig just passed away a few weeks ago at the age of 88. He's best known as the author of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Now, I read that book back in my early 20s, which is probably when most people actually read it. It's a fictional narrative and exploration of philosophy where Pirsig expounds on the metaphysics of quality. It's worth reading for a number of reasons, and many folks seem to get something different out of it. I still think about a particular passage more than 20 years later, and I find it quite helpful when I get stuck. Here are those 2 pages. He'd been having trouble with students who had nothing to say. At first, he thought it was laziness, but later it became apparent that it wasn't. They just couldn't think of anything to say. One of them, a girl with strong lensed glasses, wanted to write a 500-word essay about the United States. He was used to the sinking feeling that comes from statements like this and suggested, without disparagement, that she narrow it down to just Bozeman. When the paper came due, she didn't have it and was quite upset. She tried and tried, but she just couldn't think of anything to say. He had already discussed her with her previous instructors, and they'd confirmed his impressions of her. She was very serious, disciplined, and hardworking, but extremely dull. Not a spark of creativity anywhere. Her eyes behind the thick-lensed glasses were the eyes of a drudge. She wasn't bluffing him. She really couldn't think of anything to say, and was upset by her inability to do as she was told. It just stumped him. Now he couldn't think of anything to say. A silence occurred, and then a peculiar answer. Narrow it down to the main street of Bozeman. It was a stroke of insight. She nodded dutifully and went out, but just before her next class, she came back in real distress, tears this time. Distress that had obviously been there for a long time. She still couldn't think of anything to say, and couldn't understand why, if she couldn't think of anything about all of Bozeman, she should be able to think of something about just one street. He was furious. "You're not looking," he said. A memory came back of his own dismissal from the university for having too much to say. For every fact, there is an infinity of hypotheses. The more you look, the more you see. She really wasn't looking and yet somehow didn't understand this. He told her angrily, "Narrow it down to the front of one building on the main street of Bozeman. The Opera House. Start with the upper left-hand brick." Her eyes behind the thick-lensed glasses opened wide. She came in the next class with a puzzled look and handed him a 5,000-word essay on the front of the Opera House on the main street of Bozeman, Montana. "I sat in the hamburger stand across the street," she said, "and I started writing about the first brick, and the second brick, and then by the third brick, it all started to come, and I couldn't stop. They thought I was crazy, and they kept kidding me, but here it all is. I don't understand it." Neither did he. But on long walks through the streets of town, he thought about it and concluded she was evidently stopped with the same kind of blockage that had paralyzed him on his first day of teaching. She was blocked because she was trying to repeat in her writing things she had already heard, just as on the first day he had tried to repeat things he had already heard. She couldn't think of anything to write about Bozeman because she couldn't recall anything she had heard worth repeating. She was strangely unaware that she could look and see freshly for herself, as she wrote, without primary regard for what had been said before. The narrowing down to one brick destroyed the blockage because it was so obvious she had to do some original and direct seeing. You can find Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance and its sequel, Lila, readily at most bookstores and Amazon and wherever it is you happen to feed your particular book fetish. Today, I want to talk about that writer's block and some ways to overcome it. Even if we, as speakers, aren't writing prose, we are crafting presentations, planning our speeches, and putting words on our slides. It's during that prep work that we are most susceptible to writer's block. So how do we get past it? Well, it depends. There is no one cause for writer's block, so there's no one solution. Content, purpose, personality, environment can all play a role in writer's block. So here are 10 different things you can try as you work through your writer's block. Number 1, go small. Number 2, use a picture. Number 3, go back to your outline. Number 4, pretend you are answering a question. Number 5, try a different medium. Number 6, engage your audience. Number 7, write badly. Number 8, take a nap. Number 9, ask yourself if you're done. And number 10, once you break through, keep going. Let's talk about them all in greater detail. To begin with, go small. As Pirsig said, sometimes we do get tied up in what others have already said, and it's hard to write. Talking about a big idea or concept in the abstract can be difficult. What do you say? And where do you start? How do you actually connect with your audience in an authentic, personal way? The answer is often to go small, to get more specific, get more detailed with a personal anecdote. Pick that one brick in the upper left and write about that, and then keep going. If you end up writing 5,000 words about the Bozeman Opera House instead of 500 about the United States, that's okay, because you can always trim it back in editing. Go simple, go small. Eventually, that will let you go big if that's where you want to go. But when you've got that writer's block, first start by trying to find that one brick that you can write about. Next, use a picture. As speakers, we have advantages over prose writers. We don't need to fully craft paragraphs for everything. In fact, we sometimes rely too much on the words on the slide. No wonder we get stuck looking for the right ones. Fortunately, we can use our visual aids as visual aids. If you find yourself stuck trying to decide how to word a slide, maybe that's because words are wrong. Will a picture or graphic help you make your point more effectively? Then use that. Or maybe all you need to reinforce your point here is one word on a slide in 120-point font. Your slides are there to reinforce you. They are not there for the audience to read along like some sort of transcript. So try getting visual. Try more graphics. Try more pictures instead of trying to always push words through the writer's block. Next, go back to your outline. Often when I get stuck, it's because I've drifted off of my outline or because I skipped the outline process in the first place. A good outline gives you the intellectual structure for your talk. It shows where you are going and how you want to get there. It blazes a trail for you through a forest. When I drift away from my outline as I author slides or demos, I find I get stuck in the underbrush of the presentation. The solution there is to go back to my outline, go back to that path, and reorient myself. Then I have some options. I can either abandon the tangent that I got stuck on and continue with my original plan. I can skip ahead to a later section and then come back to the spot that I was stuck on with a fresh mind and maybe some new ideas. Or if there was real value in that tangent, if there was real value in that underbrush, maybe my outline is wrong. I can revise my outline, and if I'm getting stuck, it may be simply because I blazed the wrong path and now realize on some level that I need to go a different way. And you know what? That's okay. Making these changes and working through these issues is why we prepare. Next tip. Pretend you're answering a question. Sometimes shifting the perspective is all it takes. It can be difficult to figure out what we want to say sometimes until someone asks about it. Suddenly we have a micro goal. We need to satisfy the questioner, and that helps bring all of it into focus. So pretend that someone has asked you a question at that point you're stuck on. What do you say to them? Write that down. In fact, ask the questions out loud and then answer it out loud. Go ahead and start your answer with, "That's a great question." After all, you wrote it. And who cares if people in the next cubicle look at you funny? You're crafting this presentation, not them. Next, try a different medium. The brain is a squishy, fuzzy thing that makes strange associations and wires up all sorts of connections and internal mechanisms that help in some contexts, but not in others. In fact, in other contexts, they can be quite problematic, and there's enough of those to support the entire field of psychology. Sometimes, breaking through writer's block simply means shaking up the brain and shuffling some of those associations by changing the physical medium you're working in. Are you sick of staring at a cursor that just blinks back at you mockingly? Then pick up a pen and paper. Need to stop that bouncing knee while you wait for the thoughts to come? Grab a dry erase marker and stand up at the whiteboard and start sketching things out all over that. Or grab a pack of Post-it notes and cover your walls with your brilliant thoughts. Have you been doing too much adulting lately? Try finger paints. The point is that by changing the medium, you shake up the way that you are thinking and moving, and you let the fresh thoughts fall right out all over your new medium. And then you can consolidate them and turn them into the content that you ultimately need. Next, engage your audience. Another advantage we have as speakers is that we will be with our audience when they consume our content. If you're stuck, maybe it's because on some level you know you'll have been talking for too long at this point. So add an audience engagement. Plan to ask a question or a series of questions to let the audience members share their insights with you. Maybe they'll be able to make the point for you. Now, instead of crafting content, you need only facilitate it. Or plan an activity or a small group discussion. Have your audience pair off and ask each other questions. Then bring the groups back together and ask for their most interesting insights. Ultimately, you can use your audience to help you succeed, and they will thank you for it. Next, write badly. This is my favorite suggestion because it can be the most fun. And for me personally, it's one of the most effective. Sometimes when we get blocked, it's because we want to do well. We let the perfect become the enemy of the good because we're afraid to make a mistake. The result is that we psych ourselves out of putting two words together. So to get past that, actively try to write badly. Go ahead and craft awkward prose and wordy slides. Use bad analogies and let the passive voice fly free. Fill your slides with cliches and express your points in a super muddled manner. Reduce your type to 7-point size. Try to make things painful to read. I find that doing this gives me permission to make mistakes. It actually requires me to make them and mandates it. And that removes a huge amount of the pressure that I put on myself to get it right. Removing that pressure will often remove the blockage. Plus, as part of this process, good stuff seems to come out of my head along with the bad stuff. And even if the good stuff doesn't come out, I now have a pile of bad stuff that I can edit and revise and clean up. And that pile of junk is much better than the big pile of nothing I had before. Next, take a nap. If you are stuck, maybe it's time to curl up with your favorite stuffed bear or penguin and take a nap, or a walk, or simply a break. If you've been at it for a while, you might simply be out of energy, either physical or psychic fuel, whatever that means. You may need to do something else for a while to build up those reserves again while your brain continues to work on your writing problem as sort of a background process. Be careful about this one, though. It's very easy to turn this writer's block coping mechanism into good old-fashioned procrastination. But sometimes the best thing you can do is take a break. Next, ask yourself if you're done. It's rare to hear someone say, I just wish that speaker went longer. If you can't think of anything to say on that point, or you can't think of anything to say for the rest of your talk, then maybe you're done. Maybe you've already said it all. So wrap it up, take a bow, and move on. Be willing to return some time to your audience, and they will be shocked and grateful. And finally, once you're through your writer's block, keep going. Once the blockage eases, don't stop writing or crafting just because you solved your immediate problem. Keep typing or scrawling or sketching or drawing or speaking or babbling or whatever it is you're doing. When you're creating, when you're in that place, stay there and keep going, to painfully mix a metaphor. There are a few reasons to keep going. First of all, it's fun. That energy just feels good, and it is a positive pleasure. And we all need more positive pleasures in our lives. You may create even better stuff than you had planned. You may also be able to use some of this extra stuff in the future. And of course, it's always easier to cut and edit stuff down the road than it is to add more stuff when you're in a crunch. So there you have it. 10 coping strategies for writer's block. Go small. Use a picture. Go back to your outline. Pretend you're answering a question. Try a different medium. Engage your audience. Write badly. Take a nap. Ask yourself if you're done. And once you break through, keep going. So what's your favorite way to get through the block when it hits you? Share that with us in the comments for episode 20 at 2minutetalktips.com. I'm always looking for more ideas. If you liked this episode, be sure to share it with your friends through Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or the social network of your choice. You can find the links for episode 20 at 2minutetalktips.com. That's it for this week's post-tip discussion. I'm Bill Monroe. Practice your talk without slides, and don't let writer's block stop you from crafting your next amazing presentation. Don't get best, get better.